When we talk about dad, sometimes it's not always the best conversation to be had, but just how did he affect you? How was his relationship with you? I think most fathers, they assume the role of being the provider, but they're not usually the giver, because a giver knows how to show up in your life, giving you his presence. Is that something that you missed, right? So that's what a father does. When a father can show up in your life and he can actually give from that aspect of himself as who he is. Because most fathers associate themselves as being a great provider. They go out, they work, they provide for their families, they're great at doing that, they work long hours. It's interesting how when we grow up and we become adults, we assume our dads as great providers because they actually went out and worked. But who we are, we actually truly understand that we miss his presence. Because it's a father's presence in our lives that determine how we are going to be influenced and shaped in our identity. And our identity is not just in what we do, but it's in who we are. And who we are, this is interesting because who you are today, there's a part of you that's missing and you're yearning to find who you are because it's locked in your relationship with your dad. And his presence would have been able to fulfill that in you because one of the greatest gifts a father can give to their children is direction. Just being able to choose, like, what am I going to be able to do tomorrow? What am I going to study tomorrow? What am I going to work as tomorrow? Who am I going to marry tomorrow? His presence, his relationship with you is the one that helps you say, I've got the courage to make a decision. If you identify your father as a workaholic, he was absent from your life. He was not present. He was not involved. Those things have an effect in who we are today. So one of the things as adult children is that we tend to recollect who our father was with us than rather what he did. So usually when we sit down and talk and I say, hey, what was your father like? We don't really remember what he did for us. Well, yeah, sure, he went out, he worked, he was a hard worker, but what we usually remember is that he was a workaholic, he was not really present, he was busy all the time, he was unavailable. And all those things do matter to us because it does leave an effect where we yearn for a father's presence. And there's a sense of loneliness that walks or follows us throughout life that never leaves us. We can go through life and go through all these different adult relationships, but what we're looking for is the presence of a strong father figure. Now, that does not mean that mothers are not important. It's just that we forget that sometimes fathers are not just there just to provide financially, but he's also there to give emotionally. And I think that's a big thing, because if fathers can understand that their presence means so much to us as children and have an effect on us in our adult life, they're going to show up, you're going to be there, you know how to lead your children, because you can't say today, I built a great business, I have a big career, I have done all these things for my kids, but our children are going to remember our father, so you're going to remember your dad based on who he was with you, how he did things with you, rather than what he did for you. What you're looking for from your dad, you may not get it back in reality. That's the point here. What you're looking for from him, never be able to give it back to you because he's in a different season, you're in a different season. But as an adult now, the first things first, it's always to take ownership. I like to ask the question as, how do you think first your father has affected you? But that's just the first dimension. The next part is when you understand that you've been disappointed and you've been hurt again, ask the question also then, what choices did you make as a result of getting hurt and disappointed that affected your relationship with your dad? Because I think that's one of the questions that sometimes we miss out. We tend to look at what was done to us. So to take ownership is to say, how did my choices, my decision making affect my relationship with my dad? because automatically that now defines and changes the lens on how we look at our fathers. He was not a terrible person. He was a workaholic, but there's a person behind that who was probably struggling, who was locked in his own mindset. And I made the choice to detach myself from you, to get angry with you. So when I'm going to show up in your presence, Dad, I'm going to look at you differently, because I also made the decision to walk away. And so the first step is to take ownership. The second step is to move closer. Closer in the sense to say, let's have a conversation where it's at my terms, but to say, I understand, okay, I'm not going to get anything back from you. My decision to pull away, I'm changing that decision now to just have a conversation like, hi Dad, how are you? How's things with you? I can show up for your birthday party and celebrate you, and I can still have boundaries. That's the third thing. We can always have boundaries for things that disappoint and hurt us, but we can have a conversation and learn how to open up and be able to see with a different lens, because we're not making choices and decisions like we did as a young child.